Everybody, I'm Alina and thank you for joining me. Today we're going to paint a Christmas snowy old truck going to get your Christmas tree painting. And what we're going to do is it's acrylic paint, and I'm going to start with my big brush and a lot of white paint and a teeny tiny bit of black to make a very light gray. It's a very light gray, and it's a little bit, and I'm just mixing it here on my palette with my brush. Now, I'm not concerned about mixing enough for the whole canvas. I'm just gonna mix a little bit and start from there. Now, about a third of the way up, I'm gonna draw this line here. And I'm going to everything from the top of this here, I'm going to use up and down strokes to cover my canvas with this very light gray. Now, if it's not one particular shade and you've got a little extra dark strokes here and there, that's okay. That's just the particular way that I paint. So a very light gray. I'm going to come all the way down to this line. And I want to cover the canvas, but I don't want to have big clumps of paint. So I want it to be fairly smooth. You can really work that color in there. Again, a lot of white, a tiny bit of black. And if you get a little too much black, like I got a little too much black right there, just pick up some more white and let your brush blend that in. So as I'm doing this, I'm just picking up a little more tiny bit of black and a little bit of, and a lot of white, and just mixing that as I go. And letting my brush, like that got really dark, that's okay. Now when I get to my edges, I do want to do my edges. Because that just makes my canvas feel finished when I'm done. And because I have this color on my brush, I want to make sure that that all matches. So I'm just going to do my edges as I come to them. Again, I'm using a lot of white and a little bit of black to make this light gray. Work my way across the canvas, make sure that that's all nice and blended in. I'm coming down to this 2/3 of a waypoint. All right, so now that I'm about 2/3 of the way down and I've got my top part covered, I'm just going to make a slightly darker gray, just a little bit darker. Little tiny bit of black, a little bit darker. And I've come to this point, I'm going to come down about an inch or so, and I'm going to make like a rounded rectangle. Basically, I'm going to create a space around this right here for where my tailgate is. So I'm going to make a rounded rectangle. And that is the bottom, my tailgate of my truck. So I know where that's at. And now I'm going to use that slightly darker color, and I'm going to go And I'm going to leave that gap there. I'm not worried about that gap right there. I'm going to go left to right with this slightly darker color here. It's okay if this is not perfect. So just a rounded rectangle there. Slightly darker gray, left to right. Again, don't forget your edges. So do your edges as you come to them. Now as I come down here to the bottom, it might be helpful. I'm using an easel. If you're just working on a flat surface, that's okay. So what I've done is I've left a little bit of gap right here, and I've left a gap here for my truck. I'm going to flip my canvas to the side, just to make it a little bit easier. Now, if you're on a flat surface, you may not have to do that. But if you're using an easel, you might. So I'll do my gray here at the bottom. I might even go a little slightly darker. Just pick up a little more black as I'm doing this. We don't want super dirty snow, but we just want to create that illusion of some depth. So a little bit darker. And I might even, so I'm going to do a little darker here. I might even use this little darker right here around the bottom of my truck. And then if you have a little bit on your brush, it's a little darker. Again, do your edges. All right, so I'm going to flip that back up here. How are we looking? Got a little there, a little here. All right, so now I'm going to put my big brush in my cup of water and just leave that there. I'll clean it later when I'm done. And I'm going to move to my medium-sized brush. So right now I have a medium-sized brush. And I'm going to use that slightly darker gray. We're going to make some real subtle trees here. So slightly darker than our top. Real subtle trees. And I'm just going to create some bigger branches. And I'm just barely touching the canvas. Basically, we're making some shadows of trees. Think about it as it's foggy, it's snowing. I don't really want Ys, but I do want these shadow trees in there. Now, if your canvas turned out to be pretty dark, and again, I'm just putting some shadows in. So I'm just barely touching the canvas. I'm just letting my brush create that line, the illusion of some trees. I'm going to do some bigger ones on the sides. That. And again, they're not perfect. They're just lines that are in there. We don't want too many, but we want a few. We want to create that illusion that there's a forest back there. And then I'm going to take kind of that real dark, maybe add a little bit of white to it. We're going to create an illusion of some shadow Christmas trees in the back here. So I'm going to add another one probably right here. And I'm going to start at the top And you just make a little triangle with your brush, and we're just going to dab that in. And as I come down, I get a little bit bigger. And I'm just filling that in. You can add a little white to it so it's snowy. But we're just doing some shadow trees in the background here. I'm going to do another one right here that's a little smaller. And I start with a point like a triangle, and I just kind of bring it down in a dab or a feathery, like you could do them kind of like this too. That's just a little feather. Or you can dab it in that same direction. It's just a light gray, maybe a little white, because there's some snow out there, right? We're making a snowy scene. All right, I'm gonna put one on this side too, maybe right here. Find my dark gray again. Just gonna dab those in. And we're gonna put our green trees next to it, so that's okay. But we want some in the background. And now these can be big, they can be tiny. There's no wrong way to do this. I'm gonna do a lot of trees. I might even put another one in. Let's see, my truck's gonna be right here, so I might put another one in right here. Again, these are just shadows. We know those trees are there. All right. Now, while I got that darker gray on my brush, I might even clean my brush out down here a little bit. I think that's good, because we're going to put our green trees in here because they're going to be up in front. All right, so now I'm going to rinse my brush so we can put in the rest of our truck, and then we'll come back to our other trees. The reason I do that is it gives I'm using acrylic paint, and that gives that a little bit of a chance to dry. Acrylic paint dries fairly quickly, and it's okay if it's still a little damp, but we don't want it to be so much damp that it just really muddles our colors. So what I'm going to do now is I rinse my medium-sized brush. I'm going to take my red paint, and it's just regular red paint with a tiny bit of black. Again, tiny bit of black. This black goes a long way with some red paint. So it makes a darker red. So I'm just going to mix that up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my bed of my truck that I left that there. So I'm going to go ahead and make my rectangle here. And you'll notice I kind of went over that gray because I decided I wanted this to be a little bit bigger. I don't want a gap there. So I'm going to put in that rectangle. And I'm going to go side to side here with this dark red paint. And fill that in. Dark red paint. And then I'm going to come in just a little bit at like a 45-degree angle and come up maybe about a brush width and do a little bit there. So if you left that gap, you should be right about your horizon line, right about your tree line. So I went in at a 45, did about a brush width. I'm going to go ahead and do maybe another half a brush width up on that 45. And from there, I'm going to make another, I'm just going to use my medium-sized brush, and I'm going to use a brush width. Now my brush is about a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch thick. And I'm going to do another rounded rectangle right here on top. And that is the top. I'm going to go up. That is the top of my truck, right? I'm going to try to get it straight. Doing it at an angle here. So that's the top of my truck, and you notice we left our window. So I'm going to come back. I'm going to clean up that window a little bit so that I want to make sure that we're even on both sides of my truck if I can. That I don't have a crooked window. It's kind of a rounded rectangle again. There we go. So now we have our truck. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of darkness. So a little bit of just black to my brush. So it's a super dark red. I'm going to come back and add in a little bit like where the tailgate would be, around here, and a little bit around here and up around. So we have a little bit of depth. And I'm not completely blending that. So it's a super dark red. You can do it with just some straight black too, but it's a super dark red. So we'll do that. And now I'm going to rinse my brush again. So I'm going to kind of, again, do this in sections so that when we come back to it, it's a little bit darker from where we were. So I'm going to come back and rinse this brush again. Still using my medium brush. I'm going to make an even darker gray than what we had before, but not black, just a darker gray, dark gray. And I'm going to put my bumper in, and again, it's just about a brush stroke. Right there. I'm not quite dark enough. I got it a little too light, so I'm going to come back with a little more black. It's about a brush stroke width, and put my bumper in. There. And now I'm going to rinse my brush one more time. Dry it up on your paper towel. Whenever you rinse your brush, be sure you're drying it up on your paper towel. I'm going to come back with just some straight black. Again, my medium-sized brush. And off my bumper, I'm going to add in just a little, my little tires here. They're about a brush stroke width, maybe a little more. And they're about an inch or so down. So there's my tires. I'm going to add a little bit where the license plate would be, just straight black. So we have that there. If you have some straight black, just use a little bit, whatever's on your brush, just a little bit here and there to add some touches to your truck. Now I'm going to add a little bit right here where that gap between where my truck bed would be and the back of my window. I'm going to add a little bit of black right there so that it's a little darker. Remember, my tree is going to be right here. So we're going to add a little bit of that. Add a little up here and a little right there. All right. So I think that's good. And then whatever black is left on my brush, if it's a dark gray, I'm going to just lightly, very lightly, whatever's left on my brush, give some, maybe some tracks, a little bit of darkness here, down there, maybe a little bit under here, a little shadow under your truck. Now I still had a little red on my truck. That's okay. On my brush. That's all right. I'll put some right there. Don't worry, we're gonna come back and add some snow too, but I'm just gonna add this in first. Whatever was left on my brush, just barely touching the canvas. Now, I am going to rinse my brush again. I like this medium brush to do these trees. So I'm gonna rinse my brush pretty good. I wanna get that black and that red out of there. And I'm gonna dry it up again on my paper towel. I got my paper towel right here in my hand. Now whether it's on your table or in your hand, that really doesn't matter. So now I'm gonna start and put these trees in. So these trees, I have kind of an olive green here, and again with my white. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of white and a little bit of this green together on my brush. And just like we did these shadow trees, and we're gonna lay these on top, I'm gonna start at the top of my tree, right about here. So maybe I'll start over here, right? I'm gonna start over here. I'm gonna start at the top of my tree. I'm gonna make a little point that's a triangle. And then I'm gonna keep adding this triangle as I go down, adding to it, and picking up a little green and a little white. And again, this is the olive, kind of an olive green color with some white. And I'm just gonna make my tree. Now, if it helps you to have a line first so you know where your center is, we're just gonna work our way down, adding this white and this green to create the limbs all the way down. Kind of to the bottom here. If you want to come back with some white and add some snow, you can do that. So I've got one tree in. I'm going to start again. I'm going to do another one. I like to do threes. So I'm going to do three, one that's a little smaller. Again, I start at the top, I make a point, and I work my way down, making with the olive green and white, and I'm just making basically a feathered triangle as I go down, and then I can pick up just white too and add to it so that it looks like it's got snow on it. I'm gonna do another one over here that's a little smaller. So this is my big one, and they can overlap because trees do not grow in lines, right? So I'm gonna add one right here. I'm gonna start at the edge. So if my tree goes to the edge, that's okay. My tree can go off the edge. I don't have a problem with that. Again, I'm just adding them kind of in a triangle shape as my tree gets bigger as it comes down at the bottom. But I'm working from a center line so that it goes in a triangle. I'm going to come back with just some white, maybe add some snow to this one. And then I'm going to go over here and do the same thing. I'm going to add kind of a bigger tree, the green. I'm going to start at this point, work my way down in a triangle. From a center line. Overlapping my shadow trees because I know they're back there, but it's okay because there's lots of trees in this forest. So this one's kind of big. I'm just going to dab that down as I go. Goes off the side of my canvas. That's okay. A little white, a little green. A little white, a little green as we come down. So I'm going to add another one, probably maybe right here. Maybe it's not quite so big. Now these could be tall and skinny. They can be short and fat, fluffy trees. So I'm adding again some more white and green. I'm going to add another one right here. This one might cover up that shadow tree a little bit. That's okay. It's just white and green. I want it to look like it's got more snow on it. It's a little more white. You could do one that's all white too. That's perfectly fine. However you want to do it. Go right up to my truck. This comes down to our horizon line. Now, whatever green I got on my brush, I'm going to add a little bit this way as well. Just a little bit. Again, gives our painting a little depth. So just a little bit here. Whatever was on my brush is fine. All right. So now I'm ready to do the big tree that's in the truck. We're going to do it the same way, but I'm using a slightly different green. This green looks very bright, but it's really a darker green because I'm going to add, it's a very bright green, but I'm going to add a little bit of black to it, just like we did the red, and that makes a really dark green. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw from about right here. This is the center line of my tree, right? So I'm going to draw that line. That's why we did that dark spot here on the top of our truck and the dark spot over here. So that's our shadows. I'm going to come in and do a line like this. Sticks up over my truck. So I have this line. That's my center line. So just like we did these trees on a center line, we're going to do this tree on a center line the same way, only I'm using this darker green first. I'm going to come back with this darker green and black, and I'm going to start at the top and make kind of a triangle again, and work my way down. This is my dark green with a little bit of black, right? And we're letting our brush create those needles. So I'm working down and making kind of a triangle out on its side as I come down with my tree. Dark green and black. And when I get to my truck bed, remember it's in your truck bed, so it's going to come to your truck bed and kind of stop on this side and almost be flat. So it kind of stops right there. We're going to keep going at an angle on this side and fill that in just as though it was all there. Dark green and black to make this really dark green. And as we come down, it might even come all the way to the side of your truck. So we have our window peeking in there, we've got our green tree, and now I'm going to come back with some white, and just a lot of white, and I'm going to just dab that in over top of this. Again, think about where your center line is and how you want that direction to go. But I'm just going to dab that green in. Now it's going to mix a little bit, but I don't want it to get super muddy, so I'm going to come back and just add a little bit more. The more you have on your brush, of course, the more it's going to show. I'm just going to pop that in there like that. And that's our tree in our truck. So we just have a few little other things to do. So I'm still using this brush, but I'm going to rinse it out because I'm going to come back and add some snow. And just some straight white. I'm going to add some snow because they've been out cutting the tree, so there's a little bit of snow here on the edge of my truck. I'm just barely touching the canvas with my brush, so it looks like these balls of snow. There's a little bit that's accumulated down here on the bumper. If you pick up another color, that's okay. Just gonna add a little bit over here. And then I'm gonna come back, make sure I don't have any red there. I'm gonna come back and add some snow under my truck because the truck is sitting there. And I can do some this way, but also around my tires because my tires are not just sitting on top of everything. So it kind of covers that a little bit. Add some snow this way. A little bit here. Around my tires, around my truck. Now, the other thing is too, I'm gonna come back with my baby brush. So I'm gonna put this medium brush in my cup of water. I'm gonna come back with my baby brush with some white. I'm gonna add a little bit around up here, a little bit of highlights, but you can add a little snow too just by dabbing. But a little bit of straight highlights on my truck. Maybe on my bumper a little bit. Here I picked up a little red, that's okay. I'm gonna wipe that off on my paper towel. Grab a little more white. Just add a little highlights here and there. I'm also gonna add some snow because it's snowing, right? And it's just random little dots of snow because it's snowing. You can even have some down here, over your trees. It can be a light snow, it could be a blizzard. I'm trying not to make them in a grid. We have a tendency to put them in a grid, so I'm trying to make them random. And there we go. We have our truck with our trees and a Christmassy feeling to it. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this gave you some instruction to go on. And thanks again for joining me.